Shalom, shalom, giving honor and praise to the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. My name is Yeshiah Israel. This presentation is entitled, Israelites Respond Back to Rabbi. All right, so we just want to have this to be noted for reference purposes. This right here is a map. All right, I want to focus over here what is referred to commonly as Palestine and Jordan and so forth, because that's where the children of Israel lived in the ancient world. All right, so the origins of the children of Israel, as the book of Ezekiel talks about, come from here. All right, not here and not here. We want to point this out. The origin of the children of Israel comes from the land of Chaldea, because Abraham was a Chaldean person. All right, so we just want that to be noted for reference purposes. Now, the nations that we see here, be it of Northeast Africa or Western Asia, they traded and they had wars between each other. All right, so just want to point this out. These people over here had wars between each other as well. So we also want to point that out. These people over here had wars between each other. We also want to point that out. So you had a situation in which there was wars and businesses going on between these different nations. All right. What we're looking at right here is a copy of the Torah scroll. Now, I want to emphasize that in the ancient world, the nations did not debate whether or not they had a copy or the original, because all of them knew that the priesthood of said nation had the original of it. So we just want to point that out for reason purposes. All right. The Israelites, Deuteronomy 28, verse 68. Now, this right here is what we've been saying for a couple of decades now as the Israelites, that during the time from the Assyrian Empire and certainly into the Roman Empire, the Israelites fled in part to Western Africa and then was taken over in ships to the Western Hemisphere. All right, so we just want to point that out for reason and purposes. This right here is a video that was done in part concerning this kind of matter. So I just want to play a part of it for reason and purposes, all right? So a little of it could be heard.
Shalom. Deuteronomy 28, verse 68 in the Hebrew. Weheshib kaya Mizrayim ba'aniyot. Ba'derek asher amorti laka lo tosif od lir ota. Wahit ma karatem sham lo ebeka la abadim walish pakot wa'en kwone.
Now, I just want that to have been read and shown for edification purposes. Okay, let's move on. The take on the house of bondage. All right. So let's listen to this gentleman right here. His name, by the way, is Rabbi Meza. He's one of the biggest proponents that they dug up or used, or maybe he positioned himself to be against the house of Israel. Let's go on.
Back this up with one verse, Exodus 20, verse 2, where it states, I am the Lord thy God, which have brought you out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage. That's it. Back this up with one verse, Exodus 20, verse 2, where it states, I am the Lord thy God, which have brought you out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage. That's it.
Now, I had that played twice so we can gain an understanding. First off, he misquoted the Bible. All right. Secondly, the man sat there and at the end of that particular part tried to throw a gesture like, that's it. Like, really? Come on. But let's see as we go along in this video what we're talking about. In that skit right there, he said that the Bible was speaking. It says out of Egypt, the house of bondage, not and house of bondage. Because if you listen to this part carefully, he said out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage. It doesn't say out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage. It says out of Egypt, the house of bondage. So we just want to point that out. All right. Now, what it also says concerning the enslavement of the Israelites in Exodus 1. All right. And they made their lives bitter with hard service and mortar and in brick and in all manner of service in the field, and all this service wherein they made them serve with rigor. When you do the office of the midwife to the Hebrew women, you shall look upon the birth stool. If it be a son, then you shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, then she shall live. So I just wanted to point this out. Now, they were saying that the people were made to work in mortar and in brick. If you know anything, that was during the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. Okay, we pointed this out in other videos. And in all manner of service in the field. all manner of service in the field. So they were making houses and working in the field. Let's follow. All right. When you do the office of the midwife to the Hebrew women, you shall look upon a birth stool. If it be a son, then you shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, then she shall live. So what's being promoted? Get rid of the sons. We're going to use these girls. We're going to have the females for themselves. That is called war. All right. When they go in and try to eliminate the males of a particular people or nation. All right. So I just wanted to point that out for reason and purposes. All right. Let's go on into the next aspect. Definition of siege in Exodus. Siege. The definition is a position of difficulty, perplexity, distress, or need. Difficult, stressful. And the definitions come from there, the American Heritage College Dictionary. Now in Exodus chapter 20, it properly says, I am the Lord thy God, who brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Not as we saw earlier when the gentleman said, out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage. But because you don't care about what you're talking about, you don't care about even citing the Bible itself correctly. Not saying that people don't make mistakes in presentations, but when you have a nonchalant attitude about it, it's easier to make a mistake. All right, now, Anoki ya Eloheka, Asher Vetika me Eretz Mitzrayim me Beit Abadim, Lo Yihye Leka Elohim al Kerim al Panai. So I just want to point this out. Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh, Yah is important. Asher Zetika me Eretz Mitzrayim, which has brought you out from the land of Egypt, me Beit Abadim, from the house of bondage. Now let's remember this word Abadim as we get along later on. All right, Mizrayim. We want to say that that doesn't mean fully Egypt, and I'm going to explain why I say that as we go along in this particular case, okay? Deuteronomy 28 verse 68 says this in the Hebrew. Heshib kaya Mizrayim ba'aniyot. Heshib, all right, which you see highlighted there in the dark red, is the he-filled verb stem for the word shab, all right? Shab means to return. Heshib means to cause to go back. This right here, you see here, the last letter there reading there, that says ka. All right. So I just wanted to point that out. That means you. All right. When you're doing, when you're putting the pronouns with the verbs. All right. When you're making it connect. Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh, the Most High, Mizrayim, said to me Egypt, but we're going to show what it actually means as we go along. Ba'aniyot, all right, in the or with the ships. Ba'derek asher amorati laka, which I have said unto you, lo tosif od, lir'ota, it shall not be added. Lo tosif, tosif, all right, from the Hebrew root word hethif. So you have osif, tosif, tosifi, yosif, and tosif. This tosif, if you just leave it as such, would mean she will be seen. If you're looking at it from the ra'ah aspect of it being an aspect of see. But this right here literally means she will be added. All right. It will be added, but in feminine aspect because it has the prefix of the letter tau. So I want to point that out. Od means again or another. All right. Lir ota. Oresh aleph tau. Ra'ah means to see. All right. Now this hey there, that's what this letter is, and the dot within is called a dagesh. It actually shows it to be the feminine aspect. This is why when you look at this patak, pardon me, this kwamatz, and the hey, it shows it to be in the feminine aspect. All right, lira ota, to see it or to see her. And what is it? It's Mitzrayim. So we're going to explain what this is in a second. Wahit makaratem sham la'oibeka. And you shall sell yourselves or devote yourselves there unto your enemies. La abadim walish fakot wa ein kwone. I want to spend a considerable time concerning this because of a couple of reasons. There are black people who swear black people don't know nothing about Hebrew. And then they try to go and try to present, well, can you parse this verse and so forth and so on. Parsing in Hebrew does not encourage speaking in Hebrew. Parsing in Hebrew does not encourage where to find other similar words used in the biblical text in the Hebrew. All parsing does is saying, okay, where heshib, this is the and heshib, this is the past tense, masculine, singular, third person, and this is about aniyot and ba with and aniyot, ships from aniyah, which means ship, but it's not teaching you how to speak. So I just wanted to point that out for reason and purposes. We're going to get into the Hebrew in this regard. Then you have black people who are Christians who will cite the guy that we heard earlier, which was Rabbi Meza. I guess they leave their faith in believing in Jesus because Rabbi Meza doesn't believe in Jesus Christ. But there are black people who have gone online and used him as a cite and reference against the black Hebrew Israelites. But they forgot that there's always a ram in a bush, and somebody's going to be able to sit there and just look and be like, no, what you and your rabbi are saying is off. So let's be candid in that regard. Now, Hit Makoratim, another argument given, because in the King James Version it says, you will be sold unto your enemies. But this doesn't say be sold unto your enemies. This says sell yourselves or devote yourselves. All right. And I had to point this out to a couple of people about this particular aspect. Now, makar, the mem kaf and the resh means to sell. Makar tem, this right here serves, all right, as a suffix in the masculine plural third person, if you want to parse, okay? And the hey and the tau in the beginning serves as a prefix. It's from the hitpa'el stem, showing it to be its reflexive. All right, so I just want this to be noted for reason and purposes, so we can gain an understanding. Now, let's remember this word right here, la'abadim, male servants. This becomes important during this video. All right. Now, another aspect is this right here. They say quana, which means to buy, to get, to acquire, or possess. But they also forget, perhaps, or don't care, that the word quana also means to redeem. And you see that in the Bible, in the Hebrew, when you go into the book of Nehemiah, chapter 5. So I just wanted to point this out. And I want to state emphatically that parsing does not show biblical text where you can get this word and look up the other word there, as I'm about to do right now. For instance, hit makoratim, to sell yourself, so devote yourself. Somebody can ask, well, how can a person sell themselves? What's going on? When you go into biblical Hebrew and also translated accurately in the English, in the book of 2 Kings 17, it uses the same form, all right, with the reflexive and everything. And it says there in 2 Kings 17 that the children of Israel sold themselves or gave themselves over to mischief. So yes, a person can sell themselves. This one right here is saying you will sell yourselves there to your enemies for male servants and female servants, and no man will buy you. No man was going to come to redeem you. So we just want to make that point in that particular regard. All right, so let's go on in that particular case. The Zar matter, the foundation of Matzor, or the root of Mizrayim. Watch. So let's go over this particular case right here. Zar, from the root zur. This becomes important later. To bind, to wrap, to form, to persecute. And in the aspect of the noun, zar and zarim, it's plural. Adversary or distress. This becomes important later as well. Now this right here, zar, straight, narrow. Zara. All right. Adversary, enemy, distress, adversity, or flint, or stone. So we just want to have this to be noted. This right here is a lexicon, and this right here is from the Ben Yehuda dictionary in Hebrew. So we just want to sit there and cite our sources and show what we're talking about in this particular case. Lamentations 1 verse 3. Judah is going into exile because of affliction, and because of great servitude she dwelleth among the nations. She findeth no rest. All her pursuers overtook her within the straits. Galta Yehuda me'oni, umerob aboda, hiyashba bagoyim, lo matza manoa ko rodfeha hisiguha bein hamzarim. What are we looking at? The word straits here is translated from this blue part highlighted, all right, which means Mizarim. Now let's look at this. Mem, Zadeh, Resh, Yod, Mem. So let's go over and see where we saw that before. Mem, Zadeh, Resh, Yod, Mem. So we see what? It's saying what emphatically, brothers and sisters? That the word said here is Mizarim means straits. Mizrayim, the ayim shows as a dual plural, but it means straits as we've shown in the lexicon in the other slide. So we just want to show this for reference purposes. Okay, let's go on. Her adversaries are become the head. Her enemies are at ease. For the Most High have afflicted her for the multitude of her transgressions. Her young children are gone into captivity before the adversary. And this says what? Hayu zarei halarosh oibeha shalu. Ki yod hewahe hoga al rob pisha'iha. Ola leha halku shebi lifnei zar. Zar, adversary. All right, so I just want to show that for reason and purposes and what we're talking about. Okay, now one of the things I want to sit here and point out, if we will, if we go back here to slide number 6, Zar, we see right there highlighted, adversary or distress, Zar. Now let's go back to slide number 8, okay? It says Zar, adversary, her adversaries, Zareha. All right, so that's showing you how the noun works in that particular case. So I just wanted to let that be noted. Now, when we sit there, brothers and sisters, and look at O, La Leha, Pisha Eha, that hey with the Kwamat shows it to be the feminine aspect, as we see right here, as we see right here, as we see right here. All right, so I just want that to be noted because Judah, a people, you know, they're speaking about a people, is referred to in the feminine in linguistics. So I just want that to be noted. All right, so let's understand what we're looking at in this particular regard. All right, before the adversary, lifnei zar. Lifnei means before, zar means adversary. So let's go on and what we're talking about. Here it comes, the visual of what we're talking about. Now, this is from the Rachmere tomb where the Hebrews were being shown being made to make bricks, as we read in Exodus earlier. And this right here is their descendants in part, okay, working in the field. So this is the point that we was trying to make in this particular regard. All right. Go to Strong's. Remember, he said go to Strong's and look it up. So let's see what Rabbi Meza has to tell us to do for advice.
Out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage does not mean that Egypt means bondage. It even uses the two words here, Mizrayim, which means Egypt, and Avadim, which means bondage. But don't take my word for it. Get a Strong's Concordance and research it yourself. Out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage does not mean that Egypt means. Out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage does not mean that Egypt means bondage.
Once again, we see the gentleman misquoting the Bible because Exodus does not say out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage. It doesn't say that. It says, I am the Lord thy God. I don't know what God he is talking about, but the Bible says, I am the Lord thy God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. But this gentleman is shown saying 2 times the same mistake by saying out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage. But it doesn't say that in the Bible. It doesn't say the word and that's important because what they're trying to do is what we're going to point out later on, perhaps as to why they keep on saying a word that the Bible doesn't even say while they're citing the Bible. So let's go on to the next slide because he said go to Strong's, right? Let's go there. Okay, Strong's Concordance. All right, now this is H, which stands for Hebrew, 4717 Mizrayim, dual of Mount Zor. Remember we said this is the dual plural when we was discussing the other slide aspect, the ayin of Mount Zor, H4693. Mount Zor, H4693, the same as H4692 in the sense of a limit, Egypt, as the border of Palestine. Let's remember that as they border, Zor, Mount Zor, distress, straight, flint. Let's understand what we're talking about. Let's go on. The word Mount Zor, okay? H6696, something hemming in, that is objectively a mound of besiegers, abstractly a siege, figuratively distress, or subjectively a fastness. Zur, a primitive root to cramp. That is confined in many applications, literally and figuratively, formative or hostile. So what are we looking at right there? Ma'zor means what? Something hemming in. A mound of besiegers, abstractly a siege, figuratively distress. So Mizrayim, which they say usually means Egypt, the Strong's Concordance where our friend Rabbi Meza told us to look up in, it says it's the dual of Mount Zor. Then when we go to Mount Zor, we don't see nothing in there about Egypt. Why? Because the word Mount Zor doesn't mean Egypt. We just showed here, it says dual. And Mount Zor means distress, siege, besieges. a mound, something hemming in. And its root word zur, which means what? To cramp. Where do they get Egypt from in that regard? When we know good and well the English terminology Egypt comes from the Greek word, all right, Egyptos. So you're going to have to show linguistically and phonetically how did Mizrayim, that the Hebrews called that particular spot, linguistically get transformed into the Greek word Egypt, or Egyptos into the English Egypt. It did not happen connectively like that for a reason. You cannot sit there and show the Hebrew origin of what they call that particular place to be the modern current name as Egypt because of what the Israelites called it due to their own reasoning. So I want to point this out for reason and purposes, all right? So we can gain an understanding, because he told us to go to Strong's, and we did that. Look, all is there. H4717, H4693, H6696. So we're not making things up. The guy gets debunked by the black Hebrew Israelite dude. All right, we're going to see a picture of this black Israelite dude later on. So I just want to sit there and show this particular aspect, and let's see what this guy has to say. All right.
Knows that Africans were not the only slaves transported by ship. The Roman Empire also used its massive navy to carry slaves to all corners of the empire. And that is exactly how we can see this verse being fulfilled. The Chumash states that at the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans, both Titus and Hadrian consigned multitudes of Jews into slavery, and Egypt received a large portion of those slaves. The Romans knows that Africans were
one more time
transported by ship.
Pay attention.
The Empire also used its massive navy to transport by ship. The Roman Empire also used its massive navy. The Roman Empire also used its massive navy to carry slaves to all corners of the empire. The Roman Empire also used its massive navy to carry slaves to all corners of the empire. And that is exactly how we can see this verse being fulfilled. The Chumash states that at the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans, both Titus and Hadrian consigned multitudes of Jews into slavery, and Egypt received a large portion of those slaves. Consigned multitudes of Jews into slavery, and Egypt received a large portion of those slaves. Consigned multitudes of Jews into slavery, and Egypt received a large portion of those slaves.
Why did I do that is for this reason. Here he goes from using the biblical text, attempting to say that Deuteronomy 28 verse 68 is only a literal Egypt, to saying it is speaking of the Romans taking Jews throughout the Roman Empire. But here's the problem. You can't say, however, that is speaking of a specific Egypt, then say it is speaking about Jews all over the Roman provinces. So I just wanted to point that out for reason and purposes and what we're talking about. So let me explain further what I'm saying. All right. If we went up, brothers and sisters, okay, so we can gain an understanding of what we're talking about. Let's look at this guy right here in this video one more time.
Back this up with one verse, Exodus 20, verse 2, where it states, I am the Lord thy God, which have brought you out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage. That's it.
Now, I had that to have been stated for a reason. Now, let's go back. Okay, slide 3, slide 4, 5 here, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and let's listen, taking everything that was said, right? Let's go on.
Out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage does not mean that Egypt means bondage. It even uses the two words here, Mizrayim, which means Egypt, and Avadim, which means bondage. But don't take my word for it. Get a Strong's Concordance and research it yourself.
All right, so now he's saying that out of the land of Egypt, and as he inserts the word "and" in there, out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage does not mean that Egypt means bondage. And he can say that because he keeps on trying to throw the word "and" in there when Exodus 20 doesn't have that word. But let's go on and see once again what he's saying in this particular aspect. All right, listen carefully now, because in one breath, he's saying that Deuteronomy 28 verse 68, when it says Egypt in the English, it's talking about the Egypt in Northeast Africa. When he reread this part and hear this part right here from him, then he's saying another thing. Let's pay attention.
Knows that Africans were not the only slaves transported by ship. The Roman Empire navy to carry slaves to all corners of the empire. And that is exactly how we can see this verse being fulfilled. The first Chumash states that at the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans, both Titus and Hadrian consigned multitudes of Jews into slavery, and Egypt received a large portion of those slaves.
Now, how are you going to say that the Mizrayim, and as he said, Mizrayim means Egypt and Abadim means bondage, as we shown earlier in this presentation, but then citing the same verse, Deuteronomy 28 verse 68, which says in the English the word Egypt, the Hebrew word Mizrayim, you can't, my friend, then try to say, using the same biblical text right here, that is talking about the Romans, because the Romans took Israelites to literal Egypt, as well as Liberia, as well as in Italy, as well as in other parts. So we have to begin to see that either, if we can say Deuteronomy 28 verse 68 is referring to the Romans, you can't sit there and say that Egypt in Deuteronomy 28 verse 68 is only the literal Egypt in Northeast Africa. Because we already shown that Mizraim means straits. And we already went over that definition earlier. That's why it's important to study and pay attention. All right. So I just want to point that out for reason and purposes. The guy verse Josephus and what it says. Now let's check this part out right here, because they're going to try to have a league against the house of Israel.
Romans had a fleet in the Mediterranean, and this was an easier and safer way of transporting prisoners than by land across the desert.
Now, Josephus' Wars of the Jews, book 6 and 7 says this. Titus also sent a great number into the provinces, meaning the Roman provinces, all right, as a present to them, that they might be destroyed upon their theaters by the sword and by wild beasts. But as for Titus, and here a great number of captives were destroyed, some being thrown to wild beasts, others forced to kill one another. So when you saw in something like Django, when they had the man being torn by wild beasts, those dogs, and in the same movie, Django, where black men were put as captives and made to fight one another to the death, right here we see exactly the European in America doing the same thing the European did in his own history. But let's go on in this part right here. It says, Titus also sent a great number into the provinces as a present to them, that they might be destroyed upon their theaters and by the sword and by the wild beasts. So sword, wild beasts, and being made to kill one another. And let's see what this guy has to say about these beautiful Romans.
Romans had a fleet in the Mediterranean, and this was an easier and safer way of transporting prisoners than by land across the desert.
An easier way. The man was a murderer, but of course they're going to try to not make him look so bad. You know what I mean? So we're going to move on in this regard. The Romans, according to them, okay. First Maccabees chapter 3, which speaks of the Greeks and the Israelites, it says this. And the merchants of the country, hearing the fame of them, took silver and gold, very much with servants, and came into the camp to buy the children of Israel for slaves. A power also of Syria, of the land of the Philistines, joined themselves unto them. Now Deuteronomy 28:45 says this. And all these curses shall come upon thee, and shall pursue thee, and overtake thee, till thou be destroyed, because thou didst not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to keep his commandments and his statutes which he commanded thee. So I just wanted to point this out right here. So we see the children of Israel being taken as captives. That was during the Greek Empire. We already understand about Babylon and what happened with Assyria. And so now we see this in Deuteronomy chapter 28:45. Because you did not hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God that we're reading of is the same one that spoke in Exodus 20, that said he brought the children of Israel or Israel out of Mizrayim. So when they're trying to be quote unquote politically correct and say, well, that word means Egypt, but we already shown even in the Strong's Concordance, remember he said, go to the Strong's Concordance and look it up. So we did that. We went to the Strong's Concordance and it says Mizrayim is the dual, D-U-A-L, which means the double of the word Mazor. So how do you get a dual meaning in the literal English word Egypt? You let me know how that works. All right, so let's go on in that particular regard. All right, he attempts to go in on this one, and let's see what he says in this particular case. All right.
The average Israelite didn't have a map. None of them ever left left Egypt before, how would they know how to get through the desert they just wandered for 40 years? And friends,
all right, the ancient Israelites did not have a map. How will they know after wandering in the desert for 40 years?
the average
Listen.
Israelite didn't have a map. None of them ever left Egypt before. How would they know how to get through the desert they just wandered for 40 years? And friends,
how will they know? Okay, let's see how. Let's look at the ancestors. Egypt. Abraham went there. Isaac was told not to go there. Jacob went there, told his sons to go there. Joseph was sold there by his family to people. Ishmaelites who were going there. Naphtali, according to the book of Joshua, ran from Egypt to Canaan. Then that was before the captivity that happened with the Israelites per se. All right, then we have Jeroboam, which was after the Exodus, and Jeremiah, Uriah, all went to Egypt. So when he said the average Israelite didn't have a map, so the Israelites that was in the wilderness, their descendants as well as their ancestors were already known for going into the land of Egypt. See, this is why when you don't care about what and who you're talking about, it's easy to sit there and make certain kind of weird mistakes. All right, so we just want to point that out for reason and purposes. Okay. Josephus, Wars of the Jews, book 7, chapter 5, verse 3. It says this: so Titus took the journey he intended into Egypt and passed over the desert very suddenly and came to Alexandria and took up a resolution to go to Rome by sea. It says, he passed over the desert very suddenly. So when they saying, oh, they wouldn't go over the desert because it wasn't as easy as to go over the sea. But when he got to Alexandria, which is in northern Egypt at that particular time, that's when they wanted to go to Rome by sea. So they wasn't going from, quote unquote, modern terminology, Palestine into Egypt by sea. So I just wanted to point that out for reason and purposes, because if you even know anything about the maritime aspect, the sea, the current and everything like that, it's not always feasible at all times of the year to even sail into northern Egypt. So I just wanted to point that out. Now, he goes on to say this: as for the captives, pardon me, my mistake. As for the leaders of the captives, Simon and John, with the other 700 men whom he had selected out of the rest as being eminently tall and handsome of body, he gave order that they should be soon carried to Italy, as resolving to produce them in his triumph. Now, this is what Titus did. So after some were already put into Egypt, from there they were sailed over to Italy. That is, Italy is the place where Rome is by sea. So we just want to make that salient point for reason and purposes, okay? Deuteronomy chapter 28 and Jeremiah chapter 30. And the Lord shall scatter thee among all peoples, from the one end of the earth even to the other end of the earth. And there thou shalt serve other gods which thou hast not known, thou nor thy fathers, even wood and stone. The Jewish man says they never worshipped idols. Okay, let's go on. Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 10 and 11. I am with thee, saith Yah, to save thee, for I will make a full end of all the nations, whether I have scattered thee. But I will not make a full end of thee, for I will correct thee in measure and will not utterly destroy thee. So let's understand what's going on right here. Shall scatter thee. Wahepithka. This ka means you or thee. Hath scattered thee. Hepots. Pardon me. Hapitzotika. So I just want to point that out for reason and purposes. This ka, once again, signifying the thee. Pei Zadeh. And the hay drops out in that particular regard. Hey Pete, Patza. It means what? To scatter. Jeremiah speaks of the Israelites being scattered prior to the time of the Israelites and the Romans. Now, let's understand this right here. And the Lord shall scatter thee among all peoples, from the one end of the earth, even unto the other end of the earth. So let's understand that the Israelites were scattered from one end of the earth to the other. This is Deuteronomy 28, verse 64. The ships that was used in Deuteronomy 28, verse 68 is after we read the scattering already happened. They were scattered prior to being put into ships. So let's go on. 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 24 and verse 25. And it came to pass after this that Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, gathered all his hosts and went up and besieged Samaria. And there was a great famine in Samaria, and behold, They besieged it until an ass's head was sold for 80 pieces of silver, and the fourth part of a cob of dove's dung for 5 pieces of silver. This is in 2 Kings chapter 6, where they was dealing with a famine and they were besieged. The time we see here is in the 9th century BCE. How then, if we see Deuteronomy 28 prophecies already happening before the time of the Israelites and the Romans meeting, how can verses from 48 to 46 only be about Rome and the Israelites? There are some people who are saying, well, Deuteronomy 28 verse 48 to verse 68 was only about the Israelites and the Romans. But the Israelites and the Romans did not meet until the era what happened with Pompey. All right, and that's in the 1st century BCE. But we see the prophecies already occurring in the 9th century BCE, as we see here in 2 Kings 2 Kings chapter 6. So somebody didn't study the history of the Israelites. Mizrayim. Mizrayim is not a legal name for Egypt, no more than Egypt is a legal name for Sematawi. Sematawi is the native Egyptian word for the land. The meaning of it is the unity of the two lands, Tamehu and Tashmehu, Lower and Upper Egypt. From the era of Joseph to the era of Moses, the Israelites were not treated there, a reason, as in the reason why they called it Mizrayim. Mizrayim is an Israelite term given to that place. It is a generic term, not a national or self-appointed term. The nations must feel black people do not read or care to dig to get into information. The God distinctly said, go to the Strong's Concordance, perhaps because he felt no one will do so and get into the Hebrew. So I just wanted to point that out. They must have thought somebody didn't study certain things. The books, namely the ones I wrote and how to get them. The books are available on Amazon and PayPal. One may be able to go to Amazon and the price of it is $20 plus tax. One can go to PayPal, friends and family, and the email is hkashub@yahoo.com. There is no tax on the PayPal. One can contact me, 908-587-4841, by text or call. Preferably no post office box because I send through FedEx. And I'm asking you to subscribe to the channel Kashub Danite. Okay, this is the book, Deuteronomy 28, that gets into what we discussed a bit more deeper. All right. ISBN number 978-153-900-8798. Price is $20 on Amazon or on CreateSpace. Egypt Talk. Did the Torah come from Egypt or Tameri? ISBN number 978-153-088-1918. So if you buy on Amazon, they're going to add tax. All right. So I just want that to be noted. If you buy it straight through PayPal, you can call or text me about the number to the number 908-587-4841 concerning that particular aspect. And this is the black dude, namely myself, who sat there and just debunked their Rabbi Meza in regards to Hebrew and other stuff. During the course of the week on this channel, there will be a part 2 to this. Shalom Lakah. Glory to the Most High. Have a good day, good evening. Peace.